Before we go any further, just want to thank all the people over on Patreon, because without their help, none of this upgraded content that you'd be seeing would be possible. Over on the Patreon, you get exclusive sneak peeks at upcoming videos. You also get access to the Patreon only Discord server. Coming up soon, I'm going to be working on talking about other anime that I can't talk about here on YouTube, like say ReZero, Konosuba, and etc. I'm also going to start posting the scripts for video essays, and every 3 months we do an anime and manga haul. We also are going to open up the Patreon only Discord server to YouTube members at the $2 price tier, which also means that members will be seeing their name here alongside the patron. But with that being said, let's get back into today's video. Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another review for Boruto Naruto Next Generations, episode 276. And now that episode 276 is done in the books, we got a lot to talk about. As a reminder, keep notifications turned on because we have the Boruto manga chapter review coming later today. So if you're here about the manga, it's coming later today. We're doing the anime episode first. So jumping right into the review itself, the episode opens up with Boruto waking up in this white room where you got all these prison beds all around them. All the different people inside the room are from different villages. You have a bunch of former shinobi there, but you also have a lot of standard citizens. And as Boruto's trying to figure out what's going on, he runs into a Konoha shinobi who is a little hot-headed around the edges, and he's very over eager, and essentially he's somebody that recognizes Boruto, and he's somebody that's been highly indebted to Konohamaru. So he immediately looks to Boruto and has a favorable opinion of him. And what I like about the interaction that you see here is that there's for one moment an instance where when Boruto's interacting with this kid later on in the episode, you get the idea that Boruto's starting to feel a little bit of a sense of hope. The main thing that we're getting out of this episode here is that there's a lot of foreshadowing for stuff that takes place in the manga. While none of these characters that you see in the episode themselves are characters that you see in the manga arc that's coming during Q1 of 2023. Essentially, the circumstances, small visual cues like the cubes and everything floating in the room, the decisions about life and death, and is one life more important than the lives of many? Those are all things that you're going to see in the code arc that's coming during Q1 of 2023. So I like the little small storytelling elements that we got out of this episode, because if you read the manga, you see why exactly they're planting those different seeds inside of Boruto's head. So I thought that this was a smart use of just storytelling in general. Now, I haven't seen Squid Games, so I don't know how much of this is stuff that kind of came from Squid Games, but this whole concept of survival of the fittest and everything, you get that with Battle Royale, you get that with Hunger Games. So it's one of those things where it's a tried and true tested method to create conflict, and I think this has potential to actually be something that ends halfway decently. Now, as Boruto makes the rounds throughout the underground facility, speaking to all the people gathered there, this old man ends up showing up, the old man named Ouga, and the way that he tries telling him at first, he lies to him and says like, hey, the thunder train that you guys are on, it ended up being in an accident and you guys are the only ones who survived, but we're going to do a test in order to see why you survived. And so the way that the guy does it at first, in order to put the fear of God in everybody, he pulls out a set of cards and he tells them one card says life, one card says death, and you get this really impatient older shinobi knock Boruto out the way, and he pulls the card that says death, and before he can react, the old man's finger extends and a kunai ends up stabbing him right between the eyes, and it ends up killing the older man. And Boruto immediately uses his wind release and he shoots Ouga across the room, and that's when we find out that Ouga is actually a puppet. So it looks like there's a ninja behind all of this. And what I like here is that essentially Ouga tells them, you are all part of my experiment. You don't really have a choice in the matter. You use a ninjutsu, it threw me off a little bit, but note's been made. And he tells them there are 5 scrolls. If you guys can complete all the experiments, I'll let you guys go free. However, you got to pick one of the scrolls. And so one of the characters ends up knocking over the scroll, and it ends up being the collapse game. And so essentially the collapse game they're all on top of these different cubes that are floating around. And the whole purpose of the game is that you have to make it to the rail that is suspended above the room itself. And the cubes that they're on, they're all going to disintegrate. And the foreshadowing in that just comes from the fact of just as those cubes disintegrate, if you go back and you look at Amato's explanation of the Karma Seal and how everything ends up exporting into Boruto and his DNA ends up being overridden by Momoshiki and Amato's explanation of how karma works, there's an oddly shaped structure that isn't necessarily a cube that is shown, and you see some of the stuff disintegrating. So that was a nice visual reference right there. I thought that was kind of cool. You can go back to episode 213, 14, and 15. He said it somewhere in there during the Kashin Koji versus Jigen stuff. So essentially, the more time that they spend there, that's when they find out that like the floor is beginning to collapse. And as you start looking around the room, you realize there are a lot of non-shinobi there. So Boruto and the other kid from the Leaf Village, they had no problems jumping on all those cubes and getting up there. But as you start looking at the older couple and you start looking at the civilian woman who clearly has no athletic anything about her, you realize there are going to be some people who die. And throughout the time of the episode, you see people dying all around Boruto. And I like this because again, it's making Boruto realize death is not something that you can accept. And you see Boruto trying to fight against those instincts where he wants to try and take it upon himself to save everybody. Boruto and the kid from Konoha, they come up with a plan where the kid from Konoha ends up taking all the various poles that are used as railing on the side, and he ends up making a makeshift ladder, and they use that to try and save the different people who are left behind. And there's this one kid who Boruto ends up making an attachment to, who I think is probably gonna die. And again, if you read the manga, you know why I'm coming to that conclusion, because the kid's very innocent and manga readers know exactly what this character represents. So I do think it's possible this kid dies, but essentially Boruto goes back to save the kid, and Boruto does some really creative stuff like he did with the owl fight. But essentially Boruto uses his shadow clones as a way to try and shoot himself up using the Gale Palm Jutsu and try and save the kid. And Boruto ends up coming a little bit too short, and what we end up seeing is that one of the people Boruto helped before jumps down and is able to catch his hand and lift Boruto and the kid that is from the Stone Village that he was helping out. Now, I will say this bit right here, I've seen some people getting really upset over the fact that they reuse animation, and given the state of Boruto's anime, that's to be expected. It's not a budget issue like people are ignorantly saying. It's more of a time issue. Long-running anime will reuse animation. Dragon Ball Super did it with its most recent anime. One Piece has done it at times, and it's not even something that's exclusive to long-running anime. Attack on Titan is seasonal. Attack on Titan is reused animation. Tokyo Revengers Season 1 reused animation. When you go back to some of the anime that you had in the 90s like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, even Yu Yu Hakusho, they were reusing animation. It's something that you do when you run into time issues. Even companies like Disney still do that. Not everything is going to be Sakuga Fest. Not everything is going to have original cuts every single episode. That's not an excuse. That's just a reality of the anime industry. A lot of people now have been spoiled by series like Jujutsu Kaisen or Tower of God, or even what you see with Chainsaw Man. Those are special series for a reason. Boruto's anime right now could probably benefit from more compositing, because if you have movie level compositing, people will turn a blind eye to it. Case in point, what you saw with the Bleach anime outside of episode 6, the compositing was movie level, but the animation was very top tier in episode 6. All the other episodes that you had in the anime, they got carried by the compositing. I'll forever say, with most modern anime fans, they can't tell the difference between art and animation. It is one of those things where it's a sad reality. You are going to see stuff reused. When Boruto versus Kawaki happens later on, you're going to see that scene from the intro reused. Boruto's not the first anime to do this. It's not going to be the last one. Now, moving back to the episode itself, but essentially once they get done and Boruto saves that kid, the episode ends off where they have somebody that is from the Mist Village that was in the bingo book that ends up killing one of the shinobi and is responsible for the death of another woman. Now Boruto's got a real wild card that he has to try and consider when making his decisions. And there's a female from the Cloud Village who has a very hot design, who she's very money hungry, and what she ends up saying to one of the people that she saves is that as long as you pay me, I'll take care of you. And you see how she has no problems using high level wind release, even if it means speeding up the amount of decay and destruction that is going on around everybody near her, because she's only thinking about herself and her client. Now the episode then wraps up where you have Ouga telling them, you might as well get a good night's rest because we're going to continue the experiment tomorrow. And you're left with Boruto realizing that he's gotten himself in a little bit over his head. But Boruto vows to survive, not because he wants to live, but more so because he needs to make sure he gets out of here so he can capture Ouga himself. And that kind of goes back to, again, some of the manga stuff that they're setting up, because Boruto is coming to the realization about life and death. He's seen it in stuff like the Funato clan arc, but Boruto has to go through what we're seeing here in order to finally set up what you see in the manga. So this was okay. I'm gonna be curious to see how they handle the execution in this arc right here, because it looks like this one's gonna be a 6-episode arc. But my episode question to you guys is, how did you guys feel about the life or death situations in here? Was this a good way to use as a catalyst to try and transition Boruto to manga Boruto? While you think that over, click here to watch my Sasuke Resident Chapter 3 review, which dropped late last night, so watch that if you haven't already. We had a really good chapter. And then come back later on in the day so you can watch the Boruto Chapter 75 review.